I'd like to go ahead and call the committee back into the room, and let's move forward now with these final witnesses that we have with us.
They're doing it themselves. There's driftwooding all over the place.
Proceedings are now resumed. I'd like to call on our final two witnesses for the afternoon. They are Mr. Franz Manderson, the Deputy Governor, and Mrs. Gloria McFeel-Nixon, who is Chief Officer in the portfolio of the Civil Service. I invite you to take your seats. And thank you both for taking the time to be here this afternoon. I apologize for the time that it's taken us and the delay in getting you in to give your testimony. For the sake of the record, could I ask each of you to please state your name and your position?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members. Franz Manderson, Deputy Governor and Head of the Civil Service.
Good afternoon, Gloria McFeel-Nixon, Chief Officer for the portfolio of the Civil Service.
Thank you both, and welcome once again to the committee. Members, these two witnesses are available for your questioning.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, perhaps a good place to start is if Mr. Manderson and Ms. McFeel-Nixon could both explain to us their respective roles with regard to the government's compliance with the PMFL, with specific reference to the processing of expenditures.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My job as Head of the Civil Service is to I'm responsible for the overall performance of the Civil Service, and that means managing chief officers, ensuring that we have the proper policies and procedures in place for the government to carry out its duties and mandates, and to basically hold chief officers accountable for the performance, including the financial performance of their respective ministries and portfolios.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, as Chief Officer for the portfolio of the Civil Service, my responsibilities are to ensure there are proper internal controls, policies, procedures in place for my civil service entity, being the portfolio of the Civil Service, and also, secondly, as the portfolio responsible for providing government with HR advice as well as good governance advice to the head of the Civil Service. We are also heavily involved in the development of policy, which includes in this instance the development of the travel policy that was adopted in 2013.
Thank you both. Deputy Governor, in 2013 you did release a travel policy. Can you talk to us a bit about what issues were at that time that caused you to was the impetus really for the development of the policy?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, chief officers and I saw that there were inconsistent policies throughout the civil service. There were policies, but they were not, in our opinion, consistent. We felt that there needed to be one policy that governed travel across the civil service. This was done prior to the publication of the report that we're now examining by the Auditor General's office. I'm very pleased that we were ahead of the game in that respect. So what we wanted to do was to ensure that we had a consistent policy for all civil servants in terms of the regulation of travel, in terms of ensuring that travel was actually needed, official travel was actually needed, what was the per diem amounts that people could spend, how would they account for that per diem, where would they stay, how could they determine whether to stay at a Ritz-Carlton or a Holiday Inn, all the different things that will be required in terms of ensuring that there was value for money in the government's official travel. That was the reason why I asked Chief Officer Macfield Nixon and her team to develop a policy for my consideration and consideration of chief officers. And I think that was, I think the portfolio did an excellent job, and we did implement the policy back in, was it July 2013.
Now that the policy has been put into effect, who is responsible for it, and who is responsible really to see that it is fully implemented, rolled out across core government?
Yes, sir. A lot of that is my responsibility. So I issued it, and then I obviously keep in touch with chief officers to make sure that it is being adhered to. But also, I have asked our internal audit to do an audit. It has not been in place for over a year, and I've asked internal audit to do an audit of the travel to ensure or to let me know whether the policy is being followed. And I'm expecting a report back in the next few weeks from internal audit.
From your perspective, then, what is the role of the CFO, or the role of the CEOs and the CFOs with regard to implementation and accountability throughout with regard to the policy?
Sir, Mr. Chairman, in relation to CFOs, they are responsible to ensure that travel claims from chief officers, from other staff are approved, or that they are in accordance with the travel policy. And then if it's not, they should be pushing that back and saying, sorry, this travel claim or whatever is not consistent with the travel policy.
Okay. Other members of the committee? Questions?
Mr. Chairman, through you to the Deputy Governor. Why did it take so long to come up with a travel policy? And when would you expect that or is there a plan to implement a hospitality or entertainment policy as well?
Right. So it's a good question. I was appointed Deputy Governor in February 2012. It took us a while to develop the policy. I brought it into effect a little over a year after I was appointed. It should have been done long ago. I don't have any excuses for that. Like I said, each ministry had policies and procedures. It was just obvious to all of us that they needed to be tightened up. and to ensure that there was consistency across government. I will ask my chief officer here to talk a bit about the hospitality policy that her team has developed and is now about to roll out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of the hospitality policy, you will note that that is one of the recommendations arising from the audit itself. I would say that when we look at the audit findings and the terms and conditions of hospitality and the way that it's treated in the audit, you will note that it is particularly a very wide sweeping area of discussion. And one of the things that we have tried to focus on very heavily is the definition of what is going to be contained in this hospitality policy. When we looked at the examples of hospitality that were provided in the audit report itself, it seemed to range from functions to funerals to accommodation. So we wanted to make sure that we were very clear about what it is we were trying to address in the hospitality policy. We've extended it to also include examples of entertainment, and it will include details of what's to happen with staff functions. We've defined hospitality to be primarily the provision of meals, beverages, refreshments to persons who are non-government, although it could include government officials. So it's not driven by our sort of internal needs, but really very much the provision of government, the conduct of government business that involves government officials and the hospitality that are extended there. And then we've provided some guidance as to the expenditure levels and the record keeping that should apply. I would say that the policy has been drafted, it's going through internal review, and then we will go out for consultation. There's a very wide range of hospitality that's applied. It can be applied in some instances from the Premier's office or the Cabinet office as it relates to protocol. It could be extended in instances of trade as it relates to tourism officials and, for example, commerce and investment. And then you have, other agencies for whom it's not directly involved in their subject matter responsibilities, but is a byproduct of what they might need to do from time to time. We've tried to develop the policy to cover all of those different aspects that we can anticipate being involved in hospitality expenditures within the Cayman Islands government. And so our next stage will be to go out for consultation to make sure that it is purpose built. I should note that it is a hospitality overall, travel and hospitality represents a very small percentage of government's overall budgets. I think it was approximately 1% when we were comparing it just to our core entity expenses. And when you look at things, if you look at government's total expenses, it drops to less than half of 1%. So putting this in perspective, and then hospitality is a further fraction of that. So we wanted to make sure that the policy that we're developing is proportionate to the challenge that we face. We think that the issues that arise are from the, very much like travel, from the inconsistent approach, the fact that it's highly subjective, and the fact that some of the examples that have been highlighted have eroded the public's confidence in the institution. So we're trying to develop a policy which can address those concerns without being disproportionately restrictive and without resulting in us spending a great deal of time and therefore money in managing something that is overall of low value across CIG. So we're hoping that the draft that has been produced addresses those issues that I've just highlighted.
And this is for the Deputy Governor. In terms of the report, I've seen your response to the report. When do you think that most of the items that you've taken on board will be fully implemented, et cetera? Or what time frame would you think that would be?
Well, I believe that the vast majority of the recommendations have been done. A lot of those have been covered with the travel policy. We hope to, it's covered in the travel policy. The main thing that's outstanding right now is the hospitality. And as Chief Officer McField Nixon said, we have a draft that's under consideration. I would like to have that completed within the next 30 days. And I am not aware of there being any other anything of significance here that is not being done. One of the things that I have implemented recently was the proactive publication of travel. So right now you can go onto agency's website and you can look to see what is being spent across the civil service on travel. We have not waited for the hospitality policy to address monies being spent on Christmas functions. That has now been changed, and that we're giving agencies $25 per person to spend on their Christmas functions. That seemed to have worked very well and has reduced cost significantly across the civil service. I actually had a good meal.
Thank you, Deputy Governor. In paragraph 38 on page 11 of the report, I don't know if you have that in front of you.
Yes, sir.
The report says there's little evidence of significant collection efforts made by officials in the ministry. And this is regarding an example that they have there. Can you explain to me the process whereby a minister, and I'll tell you why I say this after I do it, where a minister who presents a claim for repayment after a trip and can't follow up with the receipts, etc., signs off on the statement saying this was official travel, the self-approval process that we've been listening to earlier. What's the procedure in place to say no until you bring your receipts, in spite of you being a minister in cabinet? You know, we're going to withhold that, or we're going to take it out of your pay, because what we've heard also, and this goes back to the reason why I was asking you that. We've heard that there is no real policy in place for the political arm, but by their discretion, they adopt the personnel policies. But by that same regard, they could choose not to, and there would be nothing to fall back on. So how, as a government and you in charge of the administrative arm, hold the political arm in check without that policy?
It's a very tricky area, sir, but Mr. Chairman, I'll answer it. I mean, we in the civil service, as civil servants, have very little control over ministers. Ministers report to the Premier and to the public. That's who their bosses are. The Premier, in this particular case, has adopted the travel policy, and he said, I want that to apply to my ministers and to the members of my caucus. So with that mandate, I would believe that a CFO who is given a travel advance form to sign off that is not in compliance with the travel policy should, in the first instance, bring that to the attention of their chief officer, who would speak to the minister. If that doesn't work, then they would raise the matter with myself, and I would take the matter to the Premier. But at the end of the day, it is the Premier's call, the minister's call as to exactly what happens. If it's a civil servant, it's very clear. I have responsibility. I can hold them accountable. When it comes to ministers, they answer to the Premier, and we would ask him to deal with his minister or councillor.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Manderson, carrying on from the member's question, today we heard different views on how they deal with some of these advances or travel requests that they have not gotten proper documentation or they have not been reimbursed for. One CFO came straight out and says, you know, from the minute he took office, he started to deduct it from salaries. He takes it out all at once, or under very rare special occasions, he'll take it out over several pay periods. What is your view? What should the position be? Should all ministers be? Is there a set time? I know I heard 7 days, but you know, some say that that's very difficult often to get the information, especially if a civil servant or even a minister is traveling on multiple trips back to back. What is your feelings? At what point, and do you recommend then, if you cannot get the answers, if you cannot get the receipts, that you take that from the salaries?
Right. I think we have to be reasonable and be aware of the significant pressures that are on ministers, you know, when they travel, when they return, and we should be fairly generous in giving them time to produce the documentation. I would say at least 30 days. That is normally when we would say it's time to publish the travel. So give them a few weeks in order to do it. Some friendly reminders, of course, but of course, if at that point it has not been produced, I would like to see the procedure that I just talked about followed, rather than going and taking it out of people's pay. Because that will probably not remedy what's happening, is that we should be reporting the matter up to the chain of command so that the Premier can take the necessary action to ensure that the policy that he has dictated should be complied with, is being complied with. So I don't like that. I don't particularly think that we should just simply go and start taking the monies out of people's salaries. I think we should try to fix the problem.
And in the case of civil servants, it's same
thing. I don't subscribe to that at all. I think we should be holding the people to account and taking action when they don't provide the receipts.
You, through you, Mr. Chairman, Deputy Governor, you earlier spoke about the hospitality, one aspect of the hospitality process that you have adopted on the Christmas parties, and you mentioned that you have actually seen a reduction in that expenditure. Have you noticed the same thing with the introduction of this travel policy?
Sir, it's been significant. If I could just spend 2 minutes. In the 2 financial years following the period covered by the audit, namely in 2012-13 and 13-14, both years saw significant decreases in expenditure for travel and subsistence, including hospitality. In 2012-2013, records indicate that travel and subsistence in core government totaled 1.868 million, as compared to 2.510 million the year prior. And in 13-14, the total spend on travel and subsistence fell to 1.519 million. This represents annual decreases in travel and subsistence expenses of approximately 26% in 12-13 compared to the prior year, and approximately 19% in 13-14. To put that in dollars, we have realized almost $1 million in savings, which is, in my opinion, very significant.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Deputy Governor, that is a significant amount of savings or a change in that expenditure. Are we to then assume from that there was abuse of the system, or have people been more reluctant to file and decided to spend money on their own accord, or what does that say for us?
Sir, I wouldn't go so far to say that there was abuse, but I think there's been a change in culture, in accountability. I have been driving home along with the help of chief officers and with the support of our premier, that travel is something that should be done only when it's absolutely necessary, and we should be as judicious as possible. We are spending other people's money. This is not ours, so we have to ensure value for money in everything that we do. And I think that change in culture, accountability, being proactive in our publication, shining the light on what we're doing in terms of transparency, has had an effect across the civil service.
Deputy Governor, do you think that these policies provide the CFOs with adequate armor, so to speak, to withstand chief officers, ministers, and maybe in some instances the deputy governor, in terms of doing the right thing and making and knowing that if they do, there won't be any adverse reactions as long as they can stand by the policy without a perceived or actual interference or pressure from superiors?
Right. Mr. Chairman, through you, yeah, I think it does, but I believe that I need to see the results of the audit that I have commissioned to see the level of compliance, to determine what chief officers, CFOs have had to say. But for example, my CFO has corrected me from time to time when I submitted something that was not absolutely correct, and I encourage that because it was an error. And I have a CFO and I've had at least two CFOs who was very willing to bring those things to my attention. They knew that I would not be deliberately doing something that was wrong, and it was easily corrected, and I was very grateful for them stepping in and doing it. So certainly there's no reluctance on the CFOs that I have dealt with in bringing these matters to my attention, and I have encouraged them to do the same across the civil service with chief officers and other persons who travel.
And in earlier when I don't know if you were in the gallery then, earlier we spoke to one CFO, and I put the question to her about an accounts manual where everything is standardized across the board, and people are all singing from the same hymnal. Do you think that this is a reality in the near future, or is this something that you're looking at, or is it something that's needed at this time?
Just explain, when you say accounts manual, something that's sort of a Bible for...
Yeah, how you report, the various reports, the treatments that you use, that where if you're looking at it from, say, if you're looking at government as a large company, and they would have companies would have like an accounting manual that kind of dictates, so all the different divisions, etc., would be reporting in similar ways. So when it's time to do your financial statements, etc., you're not deciphering or translating and having a lot of discretion at that stage. And I don't know if this is something that's being contemplated at all by you, but it's something that came out of some of the earlier discussions, that it was saying that when we were talking about each ministry was basically doing their own thing, and before the policy, obviously, they were doing their own thing. There were different levels of interpretation. I'm just wondering if that in itself is a goal down the road.
Mr. Chairman, through you, it's not something that I have considered. If it's something that has been highlighted here, we have our FS here, a financial secretary here. Certainly, I'll be happy to discuss that with him, and if it's absolutely required, if it's something that has the committee recommends, then we will certainly look into it.
Well, maybe, I mean, just through you, Mr. Chairman, to the financial secretary. Is this something that you think would add value to the and efficiencies, et cetera, to the process, or is it something that isn't necessary at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, Mr. Chairman, as you are well aware, there is a committee that looked over quite a long period of time at the present public management and finance law. It has produced an interim report, which it's close, very extremely close to finalization, and one of the recommendations spoken quite often in that report and discussed is exactly what you just said, member, about the need for an accounting manual so that we do get common treatments across ministries and portfolios in the way that they do things. I mean, just by way of a simple and I would say a dry example, if you have, let's just pick a depreciation policy, the regulations, for example, will allow certain classes of fixed assets to be depreciated over a range of time periods. So if you have one asset that's common to different ministries and a range is allowed, you could get Ministry 1 choosing to depreciate that asset over 6 years. The same asset in Ministry 2 could be depreciated over 4 years. And so there was definitely a need for an accounting manual, not just for consistency as well, but in terms of speed of updates in accounting treatments, because a lot of our accounting rules are actually specified in financial regulations, which to change them, and they, accounting standards change over time quite frequently. So if all of our body of rules are encompassed within financial regulations, and you need to change the rules, you need to obviously go back to your regulations each time, which requires cabinet time, drafting time to change the regulations. So one of the big pushes for an accounting manual is to say, let's put our accounting rules in a manual, and in the law or in the regulations, we make reference to that separate rule book, and to say that in the regulations or in the law, to say that all of our accounting rules will be specified in this manual, which can be updated quite frequently. So definitely there is a need, and it's quite high on the agenda in terms of the recommendations of that committee, that there be an accounting manual.
Deputy Governor, one of the recommendations of the Auditor General is that government should take proactive steps to disclosing, travel and hospitality expenses and reports, basically on its website. I do know that some ministries, departments are complying with that, but do you know how big, do you have a feel for just how extensive the compliance is with that recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, I believe it is being complied with across the civil service. Chief officers have assured me that they have been publishing their travel. I did get a query from the press in that they did find the information, but it was not readily, or I should say, easy to find on various websites. So we are now thinking about how we can move the information to where it can be easily found, because obviously if it's kind of defeating the purpose if you can't really find it. So we're looking at that now, and to determine how we can publish it so that people can access it more freely, whether we just do it on my website or whether we put it somewhere else. But that is something that we're looking into, but I'm assured that there's compliance across the board.
Mr. Connolly?
Deputy Governor, on page 14, paragraph 49, I just wanted to see if you could give us an update on that statement made in that report, especially the last sentence where it says government has not yet implemented those recommendations regarding, greater leadership around the financial functions, etc. Can you give us, this committee, an update on what's happening in regards to that statement and where you are as a government?
Thank you, sir, Mr. Chairman, through you. I think there is some, I should say, disagreement with this recommendation. I think the Auditor General has, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, has said that basically I as head of the civil service, should take more of a lead in matters of finance. I take the view that we have a Minister of Finance now. We have a Financial Secretary who is the Chief Officer, who reports to me. And while I understand that I certainly have overall responsibility for the performance of the civil service, I don't want to be doing things that compromise the work or the responsibility of our Minister of Finance. So the answer to the question is the reason why it has not been implemented because there's not broad agreement on that recommendation. But if I'm wrong, the Auditor General can correct.
Auditor General? Auditor General, I think you have a comment.
Whilst we have made observations about what we believe the Deputy Governor's role in terms of leadership, in terms of financial function is, I think this is not specifically about that per se. It's more regarding leadership around the financial function generally and the relationship between ministries and Ministry of Finance in terms of how the finance is led as a professional function across government. And I think that's something that we've discussed in the PMFL committee to a large extent, ensuring that they do have a clear relationship with the Ministry of Finance and that there is leadership around areas such as ensuring the consistency of how accounting, how finance is dealt with across government in terms of, for example, the development of the finance manual or the accounting manual. And I think it's more broader than just an accounting manual. It's about how you deal with public expenditure generally in the manual in terms of what's appropriate and inappropriate and things like that as well. And I think they have a clear role. There is a clear role for leadership around that, and it's through the Ministry of Finance and that functional relationship with the rest of the financial functions across government, because it is at this moment very delegated and dispersed, and there hasn't been that clear relationship between CFOs and the leadership in the Ministry of Finance.
AG, I guess this is just carrying on from that comment. In terms of your interactions with CFOs, and I saw some commentary, and I couldn't find it just now when I was looking, of course, but in terms of interaction, level of systems, controls, all that stuff, how do you find our government CFOs in general? Are they kind of all singing from the same hymnal? Are they, at relatively around the same levels, etc. of not competence isn't the word I'm using because they're professionals, but meaning again, do all of them carry out the role in similar fashions? And in their carrying out the role as an auditor, what would your comments be on that?
On the first point around sort of internal control, environment and things like that, we see inconsistency. One of the key issues is around to ensuring robust financials and robust management of public resources, that we see inconsistency across the piece about how people manage things. So that's one thing. With any cohort of professionals, you're going to find varying levels of skill and dare I say, competence. And we do see different abilities across the piece on a wide range. And people do deal with things differently, and some of that comes down to their experience and their from previous roles in life, and how long they've been in their role as a CFO and what they've seen happen. So we do see things that are very different in certain ministries and portfolios. So, for example, the first CFO that spoke today is very strong, and we know that he knows what he's got to try and do, but that's based on his experience over a long period of time in different roles in different places. But we see others who haven't got that experience and are not quite so clear on what the role of a CFO actually is. So we see them going from reasonably strategic in terms of their role as being the gatekeeper and the guardian of the public purse, and ensuring that they can provide information for decision making to their chief officers, to those who are more transactional and lower level in terms of what they're actually doing, rather than just processing the transactions and posting them, rather than being the full-fledged CFO we'd like to see in terms of providing that strategic advice and being that gatekeeper role. So I think that's you're always going to get a variation across a cohort of individuals, but we do see quite a variance sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I asked you that to ask the DG this, Mr. Chairman, in terms, and I think you broached on it earlier in terms of culture of accountability, etc. In terms of now that we have this policy in place and things are moving in the right direction, in your opinion, are there any incidents where you've deemed CFOs as not complying, and how have you dealt with that in this culture of accountability?
Yes, sir. I mean, we have to ensure accountability. The Auditor General and I have a very good working relationship. I depend on his feedback, and what he told the committee here just now is what he has told me as well. So in dealing with that, we have done shuffles. We've moved chief office CFOs around to give them experience in different areas, to give other people opportunities to work in different ministries, and we're seeing that that's been paying dividends, and that we're now seeing more and more clean audits. And I still hold the view that this financial year, will be the first year that I can ever recall where we will not have inner audits that have been disclaimed or adverse. That's a big, bold prediction by me, but that is what I believe. And that is because we have been holding our CFOs to account. And the successes of other CFOs that they have seen that other ministries are now getting clean audits have pushed them as well, has elevated them to say, wait a minute, I don't want to be the only CFO to be getting an adverse opinion. So I think everything is moving in the right direction. We have moved people around. We've given them new opportunities. We've the training. We have highlighted our successes, and we have driven CFOs to want to do better. And that has had, I think, has paid huge dividends for us.
Thank you, DJ. And that's kind of where I was leading to, in that the more training, the more they understand their role, the more guidance and breadth that they're given, then, you know, that to me will hopefully translate into them being that, you know, forearm, so to speak, in terms of any future kind of threats or lack of policies and things like that. Because again, you know, I can only sympathize with some of the civil servants at times, because it's such a fast moving and paced role and so many masters, so to speak, that it would seem like it would be easy in light of, or in the absence of clear policies and kind of you know, them knowing that if they take an action, they're going to be, you know, protected because of that, and that will translate into a better and more robust system where checks and balances, because at the end of the day, they're that kind of first and technical check on most of these things, that, you know, that'll translate into a better system. So that's what I was kind of, I know I went around circular through the AGNU,
Yes.
but that's kind of what I was getting to.
And I totally agree with you, sir. Yeah.
Any other questions from members? Go ahead, Mr. Connolly.
I just have one more. What do you do with councillors in these policies? Because they seem to be absent a lot from the ministers and chief officers and other things. So I just recommend that you don't forget the councillors in this role.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, through you, I mean, the Premier, when he was adopting the policy, did say councillor. So if I missed that out earlier, I apologize. But yes, councillors are part of the travel policy according to our Premier. Yes.
One question for you, just to follow on it from this thing. I mean, the Premier has said that the political arm will follow the administrative arm in terms of the existing policy, but effectively, that can change, couldn't it? And you know, that policy with a different government, or even with the new government coming into power, that could change. So that just doesn't, in my mind, it leaves a bit of exposure there and risk that these things are just uncertain in terms of their tenure. Do you see any way in which things could be structured in such a way that it could become sort of permanent?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think it will ever be permanent unless we make it a law, because governments change, other governments have different priorities, they want to do things differently, and we have to, as a civil servant, respect that. We probably should have a separate policy for ministers, cabinet members, for councillors, so that there is, you know, a new government coming in, don't just say, I want to adopt this, what the civil service have. We can have one specifically for our elected officials. That is something that we can certainly look at. But in terms of permanency, the only way that I believe that we could do that would be if we put it in a law or a regulation, and those can be changed too. So,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if the policy is really as good as all this brouhaha is about, then any government coming in would want to adhere to a good policy. And whether it's a policy written in practice, or whether by cabinet decree, or whether it is a law, if it is not working, then any good government coming in is going to change it. So what the test of the whole pudding is the tasting thereof. Is it working? Is it as good as has been said, or is this a sham and a make-believe and a lot of brouhaha? If it is good, it will last. what is obvious is that we had nothing before where it was said that we had. And all I came to say that we didn't have anything and we had to put something in place. That's all this has done.
Questions for the Deputy Governor and the Chief Officer?
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes, sir.
could have asked Ms. McField-Nixon to just update you on some other things that we're doing in relation to travel, if you don't mind, sir.
No, I'm happy to take that evidence.
Mr. Chairman, we've talked about the different benefits that the travel policy has resulted in, including by the reports coming out of our IRIS system, significant financial savings. I should say, sir, that one of the very tangible benefits in the policy, which is directly applicable to the civil service, is that it does provide guidance for other bodies that might want to adopt some sort of standard approach. And we've talked about this being the case for the Premier as it relates to ministers and to councillors. We've also been advised that for the LA, this has been adopted as it relates to Commonwealth Parliamentary Association business. And dare I say, if arm's length bodies wanted to look at it, statutory authorities and government-owned companies, it's something that they could also take a look at. So there is something now that people can use for a yardstick. I'd also like to say that we are considering other recommendations that were not contained in the report, but we thought were still good opportunities for us to try to derive better value for money. At the direction of the Premier, we've been asked to look at the procurement of travel and to see if there aren't any ways that government might be able to derive greater benefit from some sort of centralized approach to that. So that is something that is well underway as well. And we've also, one of the challenges that we have is that we historically have written policies and then treated them like the Ten Commandments and walked away and left them without having revisited them. So the travel policy, the first version of that was issued in 2013, has been reviewed. We have some lessons learned that we've incorporated into a revised draft. We are holding off on the results of the audit so that we don't miss the opportunity to take those findings as well and reflect them in the update. But we are mindful that policy needs to go through a cycle of review and not just be issued and forgotten. So in addition to us having an audit underway to ensure compliance, we're also auditing the policy itself to see how it might be able to be improved and to make sure it continues to be relevant to the challenges that we face. So I just wanted to mention those two things.
Okay. Thank you very much. Deputy Governor, Chief Officer, thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you both for the candid way in which you have approached your testimony this afternoon. It is late, but we've made it through to the end of the day and gotten through the examination of this report. I'll excuse you at this point in time, and thank you once again for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues?
No, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
two matters. I want to ask the audit office how many transactions does the government do per year relating to travel. We all know that there is tons of expenditures, and if all the audit office noted, as usual, was 12 transactions, I would suggest that this indicates that the government system wasn't as bad as the picture the audit office painted to the public. Anyway, I would want to ask him how many transactions the government do per year. I don't know if he can do that, but I certainly would request as a member of this committee that he put it in writing, since if he can't reply immediately.
I have to be honest, the systems aren't robust enough to be able to provide that amount of information. As we say in our report, we have given the figures that are recorded in IRIS for those years, but we found other examples of travel and hospitality and other accounts which are not travel or hospitality. And it also depends what you classify as a transaction. Is it the travel claim or the individual expenses on the travel claim, which may have been processed? For example, was booked before through Cayman Airways, that's individual travel, but it's also recorded on the travel claim, as was the per diem. So, it's like, and I couldn't give you a figure in terms of how many transactions are, and I don't believe we'd be able to get that information from the systems either, depending how it's been recorded.
Mr. Chairman, I never understood a word that man said. Can he get it or he can't get it? Certainly, each department, each ministry would know how much travel they do per year. That they would have that. They should have it. I don't know. Like I said, I never understood what he said. Is he saying he can't get it, or he got it, or what the situation is?
As I said.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
You can hear me now. Very good. As I said, the information is not available in the government systems, so we cannot get that.
Mr. Chairman, I can't buy that. Mr. Chairman, each ministry each department know who traveled. And the only way that we can get that, I certainly, maybe other people don't want it, maybe they're satisfied with all that's been said and questions that was put up that they asked and all this sort of stuff. I'm not satisfied with that. If the government does a lot of travel, then, and he's only took out 12, noted was 12 transactions, then you could say, well, what happened to all the rest of them? It can't be that bad. But if it's as bad as he's saying, then what happened to the rest of them? That's all I'm saying. Mr. Chairman, I don't expect to get anywhere because I know what obtains. I want to move on to one more point before you close, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
On page 24, audit point 3. Page 24 and audit point 3. The audit office states that its offices, meaning the Auditor General office, was excluded from the audit due to conflict of interest. I can't buy that as a member of this committee and a member of the House who votes money. I want to find out, why does he think it's a conflict of interest for him to be excluded from this audit?
I think, well, I'll allow the Auditor General to answer for himself.
I think that's rather obvious. I can't audit myself. It would be a complete conflict. I cannot be objective and impartial about my own transactions, so it'd be nonsense for me to actually audit myself.
Of course, and the biggest jackass would know that. But that's a bad cop-out. An independent person or firm should be able to find that out. Should have been hired, not even by them, but by the governor, cabinet, somebody, to perform an audit of the audit office, travel, and expenditure. When was the last time the audit office was audited for travel and such expenditure in particular? I would like a breakdown of the number of audits the audit office has had performed on their department for travel, the company performing the audit. It should also include audit focus, cost, and opinions given by any such company. I believe that the Public Accounts Committee of the Legislative Assembly has a right to obtain copies of these reports if they exist. Sounds to me that they don't, as I have never seen a report filed in the Legislative Assembly in 30 years relating to audits performed on the Auditor General's office of such. So I certainly believe that if we are to have this transparency, if we are to have this accountability, the Auditor General can't walk around like cock of the walk and not be audited for whatever they do in regards to travel and expenditure as much as any office in this government. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I respond to that point?
Yes,
quickly?
please.
Then I'll make a few other points after that, if
Sure.
that's possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of being audited, we're audited annually by the external firm which has been approved by this committee, Baker Tilly, and they will include a representative sample of our transactions, including travel and hospitality. We were actually included in the internal audit that Mr. Manderson refers to in terms of expenditure and travel, and the results of that will be published shortly, as I understand. And just for reference in terms of the transparency around our travel and hospitality costs, since I came on board as the Auditor General in July 2010, we have published every 6 months our travel costs in detail and our hospitality costs in detail, which there's hardly any of, I hasten to add, on our website effectively. So they are there for everybody to see.
Mr. Chairman, if they're there, I didn't see them, that's not the point. The point is that I asked and he answered. He's excluded from any such audit. He has an audit firm, which, by the way, he recommends, and we foolishly go and just take it on. That's my opinion. I state my point. I believe, Mr. Chairman, that the same way that every other place is subject to as such travel audit, not just hand the figures out. Anybody can put the figures together. That's what I complained about the billing. Anybody can say that I must pay $40,000 a month, or $50,000 or $60,000 a month, or 30, whatever the figure is. What is it for? Show me. That's what I'm a member of this Public Accounts Committee for, and I stand by that. I know I got nowhere, Mr. Chairman.
No, but I think, Mr. Bush, he said that his office was included in
Which
the
one?
review. His office.
No, but then he's saying two things. Because he said earlier that he had to be excluded from the audit because it would be a conflict for him to
Right.
of interest to
I
do
mean,
so.
that's just.
But that means that he's not been audited if he's excluded from the audit.
Mr. Bush, I can't audit my own business or audit my own accounts.
Who do you think you're talking to?
And
Who do you
neither
think
can
you're
he.
talking to, Mr. Chairman? I don't suggest that.
No, I know
am
that.
saying that he should be audited by some independent source.
And he said he was included in the.
Well, why does he say, if he was, Mr. Chairman, why does he say he's excluded from the audit?
From his own audit?
Why is he saying that?
Because he can't audit his own
No,
stuff.
if that is what he's saying, he need to word it different. If he's saying that he can't do it, fine. But is it done?
And he said it was.
Well,
he
this
is better
report
included in the Deputy
does not
Governor's
say that.
Internal audit
This
review.
report does not say that, Mr. Chairman. That's all I'm saying. The report doesn't say that. The report says that its office was excluded from the audit due to conflict of interest.
Right. And I find that perfectly acceptable.
Well, you might find it, Mr. Chairman, and don't doubt me that you find it that way. You ever been...
Just one final point on that.
Go ahead, sir.
We're following international practice about auditing ourselves in terms of what we report. And we're auditing the government, not ourselves. So that's the reason why I am not included in this report.
Mr. Chairman, all I'm saying is what the report says. The report says his office wasn't audited. That's what the report says, you know. Read it.
The report says it is excluded from this audit.
Yes.
From this audit. Where's the audit for it? Mr. Chairman, as a Public Accounts Committee and as a member of it, then I'm asking you as chairman to get me a copy of what the audit was about. When it was done, I want a copy of it. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bush, I'm having difficulty understanding what audit you want me to get for you.
The one that he says was completed, done on his
He
travel.
says that he was a part of his office was included as part of the internal audit that examined travel.
I, as a
That
member,
followed up and did it.
That's
the only report, as far as I know, that
Chairman,
report
Mr.
is
Chairman,
not finished. Yes,
do
sir.
you understand that as a member of this committee, I have a right to ask for audits?
I understand.
copies of audits?
I completely understand you, Mr. Bush. I just want to make sure we're on the same page, so whatever information I reach out to get for you will satisfy and be exactly what you're looking for.
Don't confuse it.
I'm not trying to
Okay?
confuse you, sir.
Don't confuse it. If there is an audit, then I want a copy of it. That's what I'm asking you. Okay?
We will.
Can I just say the audit isn't public yet because it's been driven by the Deputy Governor and the audit report isn't finished as far as I'm aware. I understand, as he said, it's coming out shortly to him in draft for comments.
Then,
It's
Mr.
an
Chairman-
internal audit and it's not an external audit, it's an internal audit of government.
Fine. If there's an internal audit, I want a copy of the last audit then that was done. Okay? And when this one come out, then I suppose we'll get a copy of it somehow.
Well, I will reach out to the Deputy Governor and see if there was an audit done in the past.
Thank you
and
very much,
see,
sir.
See if we can get a copy of it.
And I would appreciate you letting me know.
Sure, no, follow up on it with you. Members, again, thank you all for.
Can I-
Go, hold on. Go.
I would actually like to make a couple of comments in reference that were comments that were made this morning regarding our professionalism in reality, and to talk about the factual accuracy of our reports. I think that's important that I do make some of these comments. And I think some of the comments this morning reflected a lack of understanding of this report in reality. This report was about the management of travel and hospitality by the government administration. It wasn't about individuals, about blaming individuals. It was about how government effectively managed travel and hospitality, and to see if they did it effectively, efficiently, and with consideration for value for money. And that's what we reported on. And a lot of the findings we reported on are not rocket science. They're basic requirements I'd expect of any organization, be it a small business up to a large corporation. So there's nothing here from my perspective that is rocket science. And in fact, in terms of the clearance process for this report, we do not issue this report blindly, coldly, without clearance and confirmation from officers. The report went through a 3-month process of clearance then that's after us confirming the facts when we actually do the audit work as well with the clients. This went through a 3-month clearance process from draft process to the final clearance of the report, where factual accuracy was agreed in the report of all the comments, and the tone and content was reviewed as well. So I think that these are very important facts that need to be reflected in light of the comments. And in terms of the publication of our reports, I believe any step to prevent the publication of these reports by the Office of the Auditor General is a retrograde step and is in contravention of international standards, as have been approved by the UN General Assembly and the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Sri Lanka in 2013. And I believe that it's fundamentally important that an audit office has the ability to be able to publish its results without fear or favour to prevent any misinterpretation or politicization of those results. So that's my final comment in terms of that. And I would just want to point out that in some points we have been criticised about the factual accuracy of our reports. And I would just highlight one expenditure, for example, regarding to the birthday party for the former Premier, or the former Minister of Tourism and Development. That was, we have the invoice which clearly states that it was for a birthday party at Casanova's on the 27th or the 28th of January of that year. And it's recorded in the register, the ledgers of the government as a birthday party, and that was confirmed by members of the department. So we use factual evidence to base our findings on, and that's all. We do not report fiction. I thank you for the time to make those comments.
Mr. Chairman, 27th to 28th of February is a whole week away from my birthday.
Sorry.
My birthday is on the 20th. And that's why it is so imperative, such an imperative, that when if he goes to speak to any department person who might have written something down understanding, well, they bought a cake for my birthday and they put down it was a birthday party, then that's why the person being complained about should be interviewed. 27th or the 28th of January is a whole 8 days from my birthday. And I can tell this house, as I told the country, they never had no birthday party for Mickey Bush. And with all the different ways that people write up memos and different things they put on it, that's probably what happened. They bought a birthday cake for me during that day when we had that retreat, and they said a birthday party or a birthday lunch. What I complain about is far too much information, misinformation, and the wording used leaves much to be desired. That's what I say, and it's done deliberately. That's why you see that man over there is getting sued by me, him, the commissioner, the governor, and quite a few more. That's why they're getting sued. Only one thing, the country had to pay for it, not him.
Again, I'm going to draw proceedings to a close and end the meeting. And Mr. Bush, I will do my best to get the information that you have asked for me to do so. I will give my best efforts. Thanks again, everyone. Appreciate your patience, and thank you for bearing out throughout the day with us. Thank you. We're dismissed.